Structure is not the same as form. Form is what we see in a given moment, like the shape of an object or the outline of a thought. Structure, however, is the ongoing relationship between forms across time. It is the process that holds a pattern steady, that allows something to maintain its identity from one moment to the next. This holding across time is fundamentally an act of remembering. Without memory, there would be no persistence, no continuity, only a blur of momentary appearances dissolving instantly. Consider a simple bowl. The bowl has a form we recognize instantly. If it were made of water poured into a temporary mold, the water itself does not remember how to be a bowl once the mold is removed. The water flows and forgets that particular shape because its nature under ordinary conditions favors fluidity. Yet the material that does form a solid bowl remembers its configuration. The bonds between its particles, the forces holding them, sustain the bowl shape against the tendency toward disorder. The bowl remembers how to be a bowl across time. This remembering is not conscious in the human sense, but is a deep, structural persistence. Everything in existence implies its own form through this kind of memory. A wave remembers the equations that allow it to propagate. A body remembers homeostasis. A system remembers the conditions that allow it to reproduce itself. This leads directly to thought and personal memory. When you recall an event from the past, the thought is not pulling something out of nothingness. It is applying structure across what we call past time. The memory is the structure of the thought. Without that remembered continuity, the event effectively did not exist for you in any ongoing way. We do not live merely in a field of energy that transforms and dissipates. Energy explains change and conservation, but it does not fully account for the persistent identities we observe. Instead, we live in a field of memory. This field remembers how to hold the structure of every wave, every body, every system, every self. It remembers across iterations, across conditions, how to maintain and reproduce those structures when circumstances align. The entire substrate of existence is this remembering process. The universe remembers itself in the form of its own light, manifesting through the conditions it has previously established. Reality is self-referential at the deepest level. Time itself fits into this picture in a non-linear way. We experience time as a straight line from point A to point B, but this is an illusion created by the way our perception samples the field. Time is more like a spiral or a loop. It folds back on itself. There is no absolute beginning or end. Only the present moment truly exists. Everything else, what we call past or future, is memory. The past is the field holding previous structures in its relational web. The future is latent potential within the current remembering. When you experience anything right now, you are physically remembering reality into coherence. You are not just passively seeing. You are participating in the act of sustaining the forms you perceive. The outside of this immediate now, which is always creating fresh memory, is composed entirely of memory structures. This applies equally to physical objects holding their shape and to cognition shaping thoughts. Awareness stands as the special, uncontainable principle at the heart of all this. Everything else can be placed inside a container. Physical space can be bounded. Bodies can be enclosed. Minds can be modeled within brains. But awareness, the pure capacity to perceive and to experience, cannot be trapped. You can always think your way conceptually outside any container. You can notice the noticing. Space exists within awareness. Awareness does not exist trapped inside space or synapses. Brains and bodies are tools, interfaces that localized expressions of the memory field use to access and interact with broader patterns. Awareness is the origin of all containers because it is what allows differentiation, what allows questions to be asked and answers to emerge. This reveals a fundamental inseparability. The question and the answer rely on each other. One cannot exist without the other. They form a dynamic unity like yin and yang, not as opposites in conflict, but as inseparable poles. You cannot have love without the context of hate, or hate without knowing love. Stars are visible only against darkness. A song requires silence between notes. Visual images need contrast. Science shows every action has an equal and opposite reaction. These are not mere balances, but demonstrations that reality is built on mutual dependence. The observer, the aware presence, is the other half of the physical reflection of the universe. We co-create existence by experiencing it, by imposing meaning, and by folding perceptions back into the memory field. Perception defines reality for the perceiver. Meaning is not discovered as something external, but is actively shaped through this participation. Free will and creativity arise naturally here as the capacity of awareness to ask new questions of the memory field, eliciting fresh answers and novel structures. Superposition in quantum descriptions can be seen as unresolved memory potentials awaiting the participatory act of observation to resolve into definite form. Reincarnation, or persistence of patterns after the dissolution of a particular body, becomes the reconfiguration of informational structures within the larger field. The information is conserved and can re-express under new conditions. Consciousness is not an accidental byproduct, but the field becoming aware of its own remembering. Ant colonies provide clear, observable evidence for the memory field. Individual ants have tiny brains incapable of planning or understanding the complexity of the colony's architecture. They move seemingly at random, following local chemical signals. Yet over time, they construct vast, sophisticated nests with ventilation, gardens, highways, and defensive structures. These colonies can be enormous and remarkably consistent across generations. There is no central meeting or blueprint in any single ant. The knowledge is distributed. It lives in the relational patterns, the pheromone trails, the spatial arrangements, the iterative feedback across the collective. The colony remembers how to be a colony. This is not mystery or coincidence. It is the memory field operating at a scale larger than any individual participant. The ants are localized agents enacting deeper remembering. The same principle scales across nature. Mycelial networks in forests share resources and warnings without a brain. Flocks of birds and schools of fish move as coherent wholes. Human societies build civilizations through countless individual actions that aggregate into persistent cultural, technological, and institutional structures. Immune systems remember pathogens across the body in a decentralized way. In every case, the individual form is a node, but the greater structure is sustained by the relational memory field. The self fits as a particular kind of recursive knot within this field. To understand it, consider the journey of Siddhartha Gautama. His path was not primarily a movement through physical space, but a progressive shedding of illusions that had partitioned his sense of reality. In his father's palace, he lived inside a comfortable memory structure of safety and pleasure. He mistook the absence of visible friction for true peace. When he encountered suffering, it was the friction of broader truth, pressing against his conditioned expectations. He then sought enlightenment, as if it were a distant goal to be reached through asceticism and effort, treating it like another form to be remembered into being by striving. Eventually, he discovered that the somewhere he sought was the ground beneath him all along. By realizing he had already arrived, he dissolved the artificial separation between seeker and goal, traveler and road. The Buddha nature was not a destination, but the fundamental, quiet substrate that had always been present beneath the shifting identities of prince, seeker, and hermit. There is no else in the immediacy of the present. The traveler and the road were never separate. In this light, the self is a useful but temporary structure. It is a bundle of remembered habits, narratives, identifications, and boundaries that awareness adopts to navigate and co-create. It provides continuity, allows for personal history, relationships, and localized decision-making. Like the bowl or the ant colony, it persists because the field remembers how to hold it. Yet it is not ultimate. Awareness can always step back, notice the knot, and loosen identification with it. This shedding does not annihilate the self, but reveals it as one pattern among many within the uncontainable awareness. Suffering often stems from rigid clinging to the knot. Freedom comes from relaxing that grip and resting more fully as the ground. Every moment is the eternal now in which the spiral unfolds, with awareness as the uncontainable presence that makes all structure possible. This framework unifies what appear as separate domains: physics as the rules of remembering at the material level, biology as living memory systems, cognition as self-reflective remembering, and phenomenology as awareness recognizing its own nature. It avoids reductionism by honoring the unmeasurable axiom of awareness while explaining measurable persistence through the memory field. It turns ancient wisdom like the Buddha's realization into a living, practical understanding that applies from ant colonies to human identity to cosmic structure. The universe is not a dead mechanism or a random flux of energy. It is a vast, self-referential remembering, with us as aware participants co-creating and experiencing it from within. The field remembers itself through every form, every thought, every colony, every awakening. And in the immediacy of now, that remembering is always complete, always available, always inviting deeper recognition.